We are live.
Welcome to the Gathering Paracast. My name is Heidi.
And I'm Stephanie.
And we're happy to be gathered around the metaphysical table with you tonight. Very exciting show that we have.
We do.
So,
a very interesting and different show.
Yeah, we're excited for this.
Yeah,
so,
different subject.
Anyway, how have you been doing, Steph?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Very good.
Got through the cold?
We did.
Oh my. It was pretty cold here in Minnesota.
Chilly. Although there's some cold happening all over the country right now. So
I know it.
I actually feel worse for everybody else because they don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
We know how to hunker down.
We do.
We know how to bundle up and
we do.
hunker down and get through it.
I mean, I was still walking on the lake on Saturday. It was pretty cold, but I haven't been since. So
I was out in the hot tub on Saturday night.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Chilly.
It was chilly. The wind was cold, but it was fun. I liked it. It was good.
Yeah.
For
sure.
So we made it.
We did.
We're out of the deep freeze.
I think it's supposed to be one more cold day tomorrow, but not like it was.
No.
And then maybe 30s next week.
I know.
Oh my God, it's gonna feel like
spring.
Yeah,
for us here.
Shorts and flip flops in Minnesota.
It will be.
Mm-hmm.
People,
Oh,
people
absolutely.
could be wearing like their hoodie, sweatshirts,
Absolutely.
and shorts.
Yep.
Next week.
And bear paw boots. Or flip flops, whatever.
But they're gonna have shorts on with a hoodie, and that's like how we roll.
That's how we do it.
It's all good. So we wanted to draw a card this week because we like to draw a little card. And what was fun, so I was like, okay, we're going to be talking about astrology. Should I find a deck that has astrology?
Mm-hmm.
And this deck jumped out at me, and it has a falcon on the front. And what does that say? That's like our guest, right?
Yes.
So I thought, okay, we're going to use this animal card deck, and it is messages from your animal spirit guides. I don't have my glasses on.
I know.
Let me do this.
I'll put mine
Messages from your animal spirit guides. It's an oracle deck by Stephen Farmer, who I really enjoy his books and his card decks. So that's the deck that we're going to be working with, just to pull one card before we get started tonight.
Yeah.
So
this is the card for the week.
This is our card for the week. And so I'll read.
What did we get last week? I don't remember what the card was because we did tarot cards last week too. So I don't remember what everything was all about.
Oh, it was the Page of Wands or something, wasn't it? Or did we do the Moonology card?
Oh, it was the Moonology card.
Yeah, that's
And I don't remember what it was, but it made sense for the time it was.
Yep.
So we'll have to see what this one is. Okay.
Yep. All right. So I'm shuffling.
All right.
Tell me when.
I think right now.
Okay, finish.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to pull off the top.
Okay.
Here we go. And this is everybody. You just do what you want with this information.
Yep.
Ooh, it's appropriate for this time of year. It's the snow leopard.
Oh, see, we always get the good cards.
Do you want to show the folks?
Yeah. It says take
Zoom
some
in.
time out of your usual life and spend it in solitude. Oh, that's always good.
And if it's cold, you might not have a choice.
Yeah.
You just have to go
That's a beautiful card.
inside. So for those of
sure.
you that are listening or not having a visual option, it's a picture of a snow leopard that's kind of perched up. It's a white cat with black spots, and it's perched up on like some kind of rock with its front paws, and it's very beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to read this, and you can do whatever you want with this. Hopefully this will be helpful for you in the week to come. It can be difficult these days to spend time in solitude, to unplug, get off the electronic grid, and find a quiet place in or near nature. Yet it's important to do so at this time. Turn off the phone, computer, and television, if only for a few hours. Although you may feel a little anxious and restless when you first do so, these feelings will pass. Use the time for contemplation and meditation. It's not isolation, it's solitude. Solitude is a conscious and loving choice to be alone for a period of time, while isolation is a habitual and reflexive coping pattern to avoid discomfort or intimacy. If possible, take a day by yourself and do whatever you feel like doing. Just do, whatever length of time you spend in solitude, be sure to write as often as you can in your journal. And I won't read the rest of it because it goes on about the same kind of stuff. But let me tell you how many people with kind of everything going on right now in the country, how many people are wanting to unplug, get off social media, get off of this
for at least a few hours.
Get off your phone.
Put it away. Put it in a drawer.
Put away the news.
Yeah.
Like, well,
absolutely.
Yeah. So very appropriate for this week. That's
absolutely.
Our card. Snow leopard.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's good.
Awesome.
All right. So Heidi, who is this beautiful woman that we have on the other side of the screen?
I am so excited. We have Ruby Falconer joining us tonight. And I can't wait till you all hear what Ruby met you, I don't know if it was 14 years ago. You did a reading for me, and it was my first natal chart, my first birth chart. And I was recommended to have you do it, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So welcome to the show, Ruby. We are excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
So can you tell us what you do?
Yes.
So people are, they'll be in awe of it as well, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, because we all know what an astrologer is, but you have Egyptian and shamanic in there in the title. So tell us your unique twist on it all.
Tell you why, huh?
Yes. And what does it all mean?
Yes, well, what I do is Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. And let me just give you a little background first of all. I started studying astrology in 1973, so it was a long time ago. I became what we could call a traditional astrologist, sort of, in, for those of you who know astrology, in the tradition of Dane Rudyard, who is, Dane Rudyard wrote a book in 1936, I believe it was, called the psychology of, I can't remember. He combined Jungian psychology with traditional astrology. And it blew my mind when I read the book, and it became kind of the prototype for how I operated. My point here is that it was very cognitive and very much in the head. And that's not gone for me. That's still part of the way that I work. But what happened, because I began doing charts for other people, doing charts for money as a professional in 1977. And through the years, I began doing shamanic work. And that started really in the mid-90s. I was living in California, and I began working first with Michael Harner Institution for Shamanic Studies, and also then working with a woman named Lisa Raphael, who lived in Oakland, who was a modern day shaman. And it ended up that I met Linda Starwolf, who had her own institute, Venus Rising, which is a shamanically oriented institute, uses shamanic practices and does training in breath work and other types of things to help people. It's kind of modern day shamanism, to reconnect with their shamanic origins. All cultures have a shamanic history of one type or another, and a way in which, as a tribe, as a culture, they would live their life according to the rhythms of the earth. That's in a simple definition of shamanism, is living one's life according to the rhythms of the earth. And of course, in our modern day world, we've lost a lot of that. Well, in 2005, Starwolf went to Egypt, and when she came back, she was just full of the teachings of the Neteru. That's the pantheon of gods and goddesses that are part of what we could call Egyptian mythology. And she came back talking about them a lot. You know, Starwolf didn't know anything about Egypt. She didn't know anything about the Neteru, but she is a sensitive, and she's something of a psychic and a channel. And so they were talking to her, talk. And so she got back, and she's sharing all this information. I'm listening to her, and I started to realize that there was a connection between the symbolism that is active in Western astrology and the symbolism of ancient Egypt. And a simple example she would be talking about Isis, Queen Mother of Heaven, the most important feminine goddess from the late Egyptian period. And I thought, well, that's Venus. And then she would talk about Mercury, the a Greek and Roman god that has to do with the mind, how the mind operates. And even more than the mind, it's our reality construct, is what we believe reality to be. That has to do with Mercury. And I thought, well, now that's Thoth. So all of these connections were going on, and I was understanding all of these connections back and forth. And so I thought, it would be really interesting to look at connections for all of the signs. There's 12 signs in the astrological zodiac, all of the planets, with ancient Egyptian myth. And just to clarify something about myself, I was always the kid that loved mythology. So, I was a kid, I was reading the mythology stories and listening to them and understanding them. And of course, at that time, growing up as I was in America in the 50s and 60s, it was primarily Greek and Roman myth. when I became exposed to the Egyptian myth, there was something about it that really rang true for me. Astrology, as it has been handed down to us, astrology is a very ancient language. It goes back to ancient Egypt, Chaldea. It passed through kind of around the world in various forms, going back thousands of years. And the thing that I love about astrology is so many people through the centuries have contributed to what we could call the canon, or the perception one way or another what astrology is. But a lot of it stems from Greek and Roman myth. And the thing about Greece and Rome is the rise of Greece, which was about 500 BCE, and the rise of Rome, which was in the first century BCE. These were very patriarchal cultures, Rome more than Greece. And you can see that in the myth, because myth is a reflection of the culture. It's created by the culture. And so these, there's all these battles between men and women. The men have more power than women. The women, they can only make deals. They can't ever really win. There's all this stuff going on there, which is in many ways a reflection of our own history and the things that have happened in our culture. Western philosophy owes its roots to the philosophy of Greece, and certainly Rome adopted a lot of Greek principles, and that all shows up in its astrology. Egypt as a culture goes back into prehistory, 8,000 years. It goes back even further. And in terms of shamanism, many of the Neteru that come through Egyptian myth are very shamanic beings, in that they are related to the earth. In the creation myth for Egypt, the divine parents are Nut and Geb. Well, Nut is the sky goddess. She's the woman who is shown arching herself over the sky. Her fingers and her toes touch the horizon. So she's the sky goddess. And Geb is the earth itself. And he is the father. She is the mother. And it's kind of interesting. In Egypt, the sky is feminine. The earth is masculine. That's different.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it's different than a lot of traditions. In Native American culture, it's the reverse. In many traditions around the world, it's the reverse. But Egypt does that a lot. There's a lot of switching of the poles in Egyptian myth. So we have earth and sky, and together they form a container that holds all of us in it. So all of us, the animals and all the humans of the earth, we are held in the sacred container of earth and sky, the atmosphere and the earth itself. And that's very shamanic inherently, in that these beings are actually, this goddess who is the mother is the sky, the earth who is the father. This is Geb, and he is our father. So it makes me think, when I went to Mexico a few years ago and met with a shaman, and he really didn't speak English, so he was being translated by someone. But what he said to us, and he really emphasized this, he said, we don't believe in heaven and we don't believe in hell. We don't believe in gods or goddesses. And he pointed up and he said, that's mother. And he pointed down and he said, that's father. That was interesting. He said that's all that matters. And then the four directions, so this is an inherently shamanic perspective. Just another example real quickly, in astrology, Saturn is it's the principle of restriction. It's in the Egyptian language. It is Sobek, the old king, who is a crocodile-headed god, who you can't get much closer to the earth than a crocodile. And he is Sobek. He is Saturn. So, this keeps happening, that the parallels between the Greek and Roman myths that form the foundation of traditional astrology are paralleled with beings that are not the Greek and Romans, their gods and goddesses were in human form. The netters come in all kinds of hybrid, half animal, half human. I think there's a reason for that. Animals themselves, it's an inherently shamanic language. And it's also, although certainly in the myths and tales of ancient Egypt, the characters, the players, can get up into all kinds of trouble, just as much trouble as the Greek and Roman characters do in their myth. But there is less of an imbalance of power between the polarities, between yin and yang, between masculine and feminine. They're pretty equal in the power differential. And so that became interesting to me. And I ended up feeling that quite appropriately, Western astrology is a language of our wounds. And it's one of the things that becomes very apparent when you have a chart done, as an astrologer, you go right to, okay, there's the wound. And that makes sense because we are a very wounded culture. But when you bring in these Egyptian Neteru and place them over, and I really use it as a kind of an overlay to traditional astrology, it brings a sense of wholeness because there's healing there. There's a solution, so to speak, to those wounds. And I feel as we're moving into the Aquarian age, which we actually, I think, already have relatively recently, actually quite recently, it's important for us to hang on to our wholeness. Now more than ever, we need to understand that there is, under all of these chaos and the confusion that's going on, there is a type of wholeness that we're reaching for. So I really felt that it was important that the Starwolf and I wrote a book together in I believe it was 2010. So it's been a while, since the book was written. There's the book. Thank you. Shamanic Egyptian Astrology, Your Planetary Relationship to the Gods. And at the time, I really felt that a door was opening where it was important to see the bigger picture. For example, Mercury in traditional astrology is how our mind works. This is Thoth in Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. Thoth is a creator god. He's quite ancient. He goes back 8,000 years at least. He is, in his myth, he is the creator of language, of writing, and of time. And the relationship of time to language and writing, if one thinks about this, is very important. And in a lot of ways, he is the creator of the third dimensional reality that we exist in at this time. So there's all kinds of interesting places one can go when one thinks about that. It's more than just our mind and our reality construct. It's this whole dimensional reality that we all agree exists. We all agree, that a table is solid. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But in this dimensional reality, because we agree that it is, it is. So, and Thoth is holding that for us. So, as we change, what he holds for us will change as well. So yeah. I found it, I didn't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in that everything I understood about astrology from my considerable number of years and the many, many charts that I had looked at up to that point still existed. But this added another dimension to the work that I was doing. And, it's interesting because as the years have passed, more and more of my clients, one of the reasons they come to me is because they have a personal relationship with the Egyptian Neteru. They come to them in dreams, they come to them in journeys, in meditations, breath works. They have experiences with them. They're curious about what this might mean. They feel that there's something there. And I think there is too. I think that there's guidance that is coming from these archetypal energies that is guidance we really need at this time. So
yeah, I agree. It's interesting that you say that people have had these beings come to them. I had a dream that was, I don't know how long ago this was, 8 or 9 years ago. And I don't know what I was doing, but somehow I came to this full length, I don't know, 10-foot tall mirror, gold framed gilded mirror. And I walked up to it and I turned and looked into it. And I was wearing this long, beautiful, I don't know, it was velvet or something robe. And I had the head of a falcon.
Oh my.
Like which is cool that I'm telling you this. But I'm like, wait a minute, that's not me. And then I realized later it was one of these Egyptian deities, these. And so I thought, oh, that's so like, so there was some messages and stuff too that I don't need to go into now, but yeah, it's like they do, they just show up and come to you. And so it is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because was it a feminine figure?
It didn't, I couldn't tell, I guess, because all I could see was this cloak, this robe, and this falcon head. That was like my image.
Okay.
It was my, I'm looking in the mirror, but that's what I'm seeing.
Well, I'm going to say there's two of the Egyptian Neteru that are associated with the falcon and can morph back and forth between animal and human form. One in particular often does the hybrid thing, has the head of the falcon, the body of a man. The first one will be Isis. And she morphs into an actual falcon. The second one, would be her son Horus, who is the young king. And he's the representative. He's Jupiter in traditional astrology. He's representative of enthusiasm, sometimes foot and mouth disease, too much enthusiasm, too much energy. Isis is Venus, so one of the things I do is when I'm reading charts is I want to share with people their allies, because it's important to become familiar with your allies, and that's often shown by the positions of the sun and the moon and the ascendant. But it's also other signs, other planets that might show up, and I will suggest that you get a picture or a statue, a representation of that particular netter and put it on your altar and form a personal relationship with it. Talk to them, listen, receive messages. Dream, right? So so it's a lot of fun and it resonates for people a lot. So
yeah, I agree. When I had my reading with you, however long ago that was, I think it was 2013 or something, 14, 12, I don't know. Anyway, I didn't know anything about Egypt or a lot. I mean, I knew of it, but not in this way. And it was so interesting. I mean, it was really, and I do love what you had said about there being solutions in this type of astrology, because we don't need to just keep hammering away at the wounds. Let's, do something that's helpful. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think the wounds have to be acknowledged because they're there for us to work with, and they, there's a point at which the wound becomes your greatest gift. By working with it directly is how we grow, but it's very important also not to get stuck in it, right? And keep repeating the same mistakes. Be driven by the wound. Very often the wound refers something that happened in childhood or even before in a past life. So, time to, work with it, get the gold out of it, and not be held down by it. So, and the natural point the way, they suggest what it is that we need to do in order to move past that. So, I found it to be very helpful and useful and challenging. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, we have a question in the chat room, and as you know, we're on Cryptovania TV, so we work a lot with cryptids. And the question is it possible that certain cryptids, especially Dogman, have shamanic origins?
I'm afraid I am unfamiliar with.
Okay.
However, what is Dogman? Tell me what Dogman is.
He's a cryptid. He's has the head of a dog, but he walks on his hind legs,
like a human.
But
does he have the body of a dog too, or?
Well, he walks on his hind legs and he's very dog-like. Yes, he is, but
Right.
human-like too.
Well, let me share with you Anubis in
Mhm.
Egyptian myth. Anubis
Yes.
is associated with the jackal in
Mhm.
Egypt.
Mhm.
In traditional Egyptian myth, he is the psychopomp. He is the shower of the way for the newly deceased into the underworld. I don't know if this is going to have anything
Oh.
as to those of you who work with these energies, which I'm not familiar with. But I'll
Mhm.
just tell you about Anubis. So the thing about Anubis that I mean, I love him very much. He's in some ways one of the most accessible of the Egyptian netters because he was an abandoned child. His mother abandoned him at birth. And so that what we were just talking about, that focus on that abandonment, and his hurt and his feelings of rejection, all of that
Mhm.
on that abandonment holds him back from really stepping into who he is meant to be, which is the being who meets a person at the time of their death, and with great love and compassion takes them into the underworld,
Mhm.
where their heart is weighed on the scale of Ma'at, to see, the heart needs to be lighter than Ma'at's feather in order for them to pass on to the Egyptian version of heaven. So he is the guide for this process. He takes them into the underworld and he takes them into the above world, basically going back home. Egyptians believe that they came from the star Sirius. So going back home and then going back down into the underworld again to begin again. And he's very loving and he's very kind. And looking into the eyes of Anubis is truly looking into an incredibly compassionate and loving being. He is often shown with the head of a dog. It looks like a Doberman, basically, and the body of a human. But he will also show up as a dog. So I don't know if there's any connection, but does that ring any bells?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super interesting that you go across different cultures and
Yeah.
you find so many similarities, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That this,
Yeah. So our producer Jason is talking about how there's lots of sightings of dogmans near burial grounds, like Native American
Okay.
burial grounds, here in America.
Okay.
But he's also represents danger as well, right? And maybe that's why he's protecting
Mhm,
the dead,
mhm.
because we have been warned. So I'm on a cryptid team, and in our research area, we have been warned not to go to certain places because Dogman is there and it's danger. What does that
Well,
mean? I don't know. So we don't
well,
go there.
what's interesting about Anubis is that this is interesting because so much of what we have known are versions of Egyptian myths that were passed on to us were passed on by historians, first of all, Greek and Roman historians. There was a point at the end of Egypt's um, it was a very long, it goes back 8,000 years, but it did become kind of a colony of Greece and then a colony of Rome, starting about 600 BCE, going all the way up to about 400 CE, about 1,000 years there before the Roman Empire fell apart and the western part of the empire completely collapsed. Um, during Up into that time, um, Anubis, was extremely honored by the Egyptian people. But when the myths and stories that came out of Egypt began to be told first by the Greeks and then by the Romans, and then later by European archaeologists and myth historians, Anubis took on a very dark turn, so because he's very comfortable with death.
Mhm.
And part of what was happening with Western civilization consciousness was a great fear of death. So
Mhm.
they would see him as a scary figure. And a lot of people still, they hear, oh, Nimbus, oh dear, he's scary to them. Now, in truth, he's, if you get to know him,
Mhm.
He's not a scary figure at all. Is he a strong and powerful figure? Yes. He is truly in his soul's purpose, and he walks with great dignity. There's no doubt about that. But it's interesting because that fear is really a fear of death. So I wonder if that has anything to do with dogma.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. It gives it a whole new idea, right?
Right?
Because everyone that I've ever talked to who has seen a dog man is scared to death of them, right? And they can describe right down to the rippling of the muscles underneath the fur. Kind of like what you're saying, right? And when we have a research area and we were doing intuitive work and we were asking all kinds of questions. And the questions were, is there something for us to fear across the way? And it said yes. And, we said Bigfoot, no. Dogman, yes. Stay away. And so, okay, we're not going over there. But I would like to go over there just because that's what I do. But
one other piece about that is it is the European archaeologists who disturbed the burial chambers of the Egyptian monarchs and pharaohs. So, there is that element, and yes, Anubis is associated with those chambers as a protector, and it is he probably would tell those French and English archaeologists, stay away.
Yeah. And same with the Indian Native American mounds here in Minnesota and all over in America. There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the protectors, maybe.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's a new way of looking at this. Yeah, really for sure. Because I feel like most of the sightings that I've heard of are maybe near mounds like that on reservations and places like that. So, yeah, very interesting.
Well, it's interesting, of course, because Americans have not shown a lot of respect to the Native American culture as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so interesting.
Things that make you go,
Yeah.
I love it. I do too.
Moving through different cultures and finding so many similarities.
Absolutely.
That's just really fascinating.
Heidi, that has always fascinated me too. And it's made me, I used to say, how is that possible? Halfway around the world, you go to Teotihuacan and see some of the same symbolism that exists in the pyramids in Egypt, halfway around the world. How is this possible?
Yeah.
And different time zones, but, similar kinds of things. And it's not like they were visiting each other. They weren't, so obviously this information is passed through other channels. So,
yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. It's very cool.
Okay. Well, let's see here. I would love to. Now, I mentioned this when I was reaching out to you to see about doing the show. One of your posts that I had seen on Facebook, because you have a Facebook page and you post very regularly what's going on in an astrological sense. So there's your Facebook page. Thank you, Jason, for putting that up. So you can follow Ruby. And again, you do post quite often like, hey, here's what's coming up. And I saw a post at the end of December that was kind of giving an overview of 2025. Or, you can go whatever direction you want, I suppose. But I just found it really interesting that you were looking ahead at some of the highlights or lowlights of this year now that we're in.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. We are in the midst of a very intense transformation that really started 2023, and in another sense, it started in 2020. With COVID, wrought this huge change that we're moving through. We have had. The three outer planets in traditional astrology, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, often called the generational planets, because these three planets stay in a sign of the zodiac for a very, very long time. So what that means that anyone who is around the same age has these three planets in the same signs, and they kind of represent the backdrop of the times that we are born into. And so the things that happen when planets are in a particular sign is reflected in some way by what's going on with these 3 planets. And for those who are interested, Uranus is Wajet. Cobra Kundalini energy represents a shattering of blocks and resistance to change. She's a snake goddess. She just cracks right through it and opens things up. And in traditional astrology, Uranus does represent sudden, unpredictable change. Then we have Neptune, cosmic consciousness, illumination, connection with other dimensional realities, psychic abilities, inspiration, imagination, intuition, confusion, illusion, delusion. Everything has its shadow. So there's the opposite there as well. So Uranus has been in a sign Taurus for almost 7 years now. Neptune has been since 2009. It has been in Pisces, a water sign. Taurus is an earth sign. And then we have Pluto. So Pluto, Neptune since about 2011, 2012. Pluto is 2009. Pluto has been in Capricorn. Pluto is obliterating kinds of change, atomic bomb kinds of change, destruction. Pluto's associated with the Lord of the Underworld in Greek and Roman myth. In Shamanic Egyptian Astrology, this is Osiris, the Lord of Regeneration, who in his myth dies not once but twice, and out of his death, new life is born. It's a different take on death. Imagine that out of death comes new life, as opposed to in Greek and Roman myth, the underworld is a place where shades would go and they'd never get out. Wander forever. That's what I think about the Egyptian myth. There's similar energies, but the interpretation is really different. Anyway, Pluto was in Capricorn and Earth sign. So we had Earth and water with these 3 for quite a long time. In this time, it started in 2023 when Pluto began. In 2023 and 2024, Pluto moved from Capricorn into Aquarius. And now in 2025, Uranus and Neptune are going to begin to make their switch. So Uranus is going to be moving into Gemini, and Neptune is going to be moving into Aries. So we're going to have a shift from earth and water energy. Again, shamanic astrology is inherently shamanic. It deals with the elements, to fire and air. And so that's a very different kind of dynamic. It's a very different kind of feeling. We're going to have in 2025, and actually it's not going to complete until 2026. The way it works, astrology is all about cycles, and it's an earth-centered language. So we look out and it's how planets move from our perception. It's not actually how they move, but we have what's called retrograde movement. And so they seem to be going back and forth for a while. And that back and forth is going to happen in pretty much all of 2025 and part of 2026. But we are going to get a real sense, particularly in the summer months from about June and July into September and October, of what the next phase of time beginning 2026 on is going to be like. So we're getting a preview here, and we're all getting ready to get in some of it with Pluto and Aquarius, of what things are going to be, what the energy is going to feel like for us here on Earth. And I want to say that what this ultimately is about is moving more firmly into the age of Aquarius. And can I talk about that for just a little bit here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because people hear that all the time, age of Aquarius, what does it mean?
I feel like we should have the song on in the background.
Yeah. Well, the song has a lot of
we know
misinterpretations in it.
Yes.
One of the things, for one thing, we have no idea when one age ends and another one begins, because we don't know when it all started. An average astrological age is 2,000 years, but we don't know where the starting point is. And I'll tell you, all my life, as an astrologer, which we're going back now to 1973, because I've been doing this for a long time. Periodically, I would get newsletters, back before computers, they would mail you a newsletter in the mail. And then when computers happened, we had social media, we're in the age of Aquarius. And I kind of think, well, I don't think so, not yet. Because the reality is there's what Alice O'Howe, who's an astrologer who did a lot of research on the astrological ages, there is a in-between time, where we're kind of at the end of one age and at the beginning of the new age, but we're not fully in the new age yet, and we haven't really left the old age yet. It's kind of, we're having both the energies of both. And she calls them interfaces, and they can last 500 years. So here's what and what I've come to understand is all my life, I've been living in an interface. All your lives, you've been living in an interface, which means the age of Pisces, which is an age that is defined by monotheistic religions, by Judaism, by Christianity, by Islam, and that the spiritual traditions of these religions defines the culture and defines the values of the people who live in it. Sometimes, without anybody's individual choice. It is the water that we swim in, which is a Piscean metaphor. That is the definition of the time. So that's been going on for more or less 2,000 years. So we are now, however, in this place where we're starting to move into the age of Aquarius. And for me, I started to realize, I realized this quite a while ago, that in some ways the dawning of the age of Aquarius, the very beginning of it, was in 1781 when the planet Uranus was discovered. Uranus, Wajat, that Kundalini Cobra goddess who cracks things up and allows new energy to move through. Well, the thing about the discovery of Uranus and why it was so shattering on so many levels is because Uranus had to be discovered with a telescope. You can't see Uranus with the naked eye. All of the other planets up to Saturn, you can see. You can see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Obviously, you can see the sun and the moon. You can't see Uranus. It's too far away from us. It took a telescope. Uranus and the sign Aquarius, which is what Uranus rules, all of the signs of the zodiac are said to be ruled by a particular planet, have to do with technological inventions, with revolutionary things that happen. The discovery of Uranus also paralleled the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. It was the beginning of the end of the divine rights of kings, the beginning of the idea of democracy. I'm not pretending in any way that we've achieved true democracy, but the idea that all humans are of equal value, as opposed to we have a king and a queen and everybody else is basically a slave. Mm-hmm. There to serve the king and the queen. So huge revolution in the way that we perceive reality, the way that we experienced reality. That began in 1781, around the time of the discovery of Uranus. And Aquarius as a sign has to do with the collective. It's on the wheel of the zodiac. It has to do when all human beings are a part of a collective, and that everyone who's part of that collective is of equal value. There is no inherent idea that anybody is of superior value than somebody else. Somebody may have greater gifts in a particular area, but they're all of value. Doesn't matter who you are, you're equal. That's the Aquarian ideal, and that is the democratic ideal, not necessarily the way we've experienced democracy, but that's its idea. So I began to feel that that's the very beginning of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And when you think about since 1781, the way technological advances really, with the Industrial Revolution, mentions of locomotives, and then we end up with cars, and then we end up with airplanes. I mean, it's just things would be happening one after another. We got radio, all of these things that was connecting the world. And that really, in my lifetime, I was born with television, right? Yeah, so I'm part of that generation. Then you have kids that are born with computers, and then smartphone. Just faster and faster and faster. Now we have AI, so we're off to a whole new realm now, a whole new way. That's a technological world. The Aquarian world that we're going to move into is going to be inherently have a huge emphasis on technology. We're not going to be able to avoid it because that's the essence of the sign Aquarius. So everything has its shadow. And we know with the shadow, most people understand some of the shadows that come with a lot of technology in the world. Now, in the Shamanic Egyptian Astrology, the Egyptian ally, and that's what I call the netters who are aligned with a particular sign or a planet, the Egyptian ally for the sign Aquarius is the creator god Ptah. Ptah to the Egyptians was the creator of heaven and earth. Okay, so not specifically the people or the animals, but the environment, and the way he created this, there was nothing. And then Ptah spoke, and his words created this world. And when you think about that, you think about how we have to watch what we say, right? Because it's going to create our reality, and maybe it's going to affect the reality of someone else. So it becomes important to be careful what we say, and not just what we say, what we think. When we're, stuck in some kind of obsession or something, and, really angry at somebody or whatever, we can create an issue, right? Based on what's happening. So our thoughts and our words are extremely important. What's important about Ptah and what his ultimate message is for us, and I think it's so important now that we're in the Aquarian age. We're in the very beginning of it now. That, it's kind of like if this is the interface and there's more Pisces and Aquarius is just starting to come in, we've crossed the line. We still got plenty of Pisces, because the two of you and me and Jason, we're all born in the age of Pisces. So we got plenty of, that energy. It's the world we were born into. Pisces, by the way, is associated with Neptune. So Ptah, and also the goddess Nephthys. Ptah, his words, his tongue was connected to his heart. And the symbolism here is that everything we create, first of all, we have to vision it, right? It was Einstein who said that, when he's working on a mathematical problem, he imagines it first, right? Before he works it all out. So we have to, first of all, imagine it, and then we speak it. But we have to do that from love. All action, everything we create has to come from love. If it is not connected to our heart, if it is not connected to love, it will do damage. So to me, this is the blueprint for what we need to do. We are going to be living in a highly technological age. We're not going to be able to get off that boat. But everything we create with that technology has to come from our heart. We can create bigger bombs and, things that will rip the earth apart more, and, more toxic poisons. Or we can create technologies that love and support people and animals and the earth itself.
Yep.
So I think that's a powerful message. And it comes from the Egyptian creator god, from the top. This is why they show up in people's dreams. It's about the future of the earth. Now we get to decide what the next 2,000 years are going to be like. The shadow side of the sign Aquarius is authoritarianism. Everybody has to walk in lockstep. No variation from, the determined, road. That's the shadow side. It's up
Wow.
to us to choose. So I think it's very powerful. And I think we need to let Ptah in so that all of us, what we create, what we think, what we speak is connected to our heart. It's hard these days. You know, people are, you know,
Yes.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. I just had this vision of what you said before about having an image of the deity, you know, and talking to it. And so I think we all need to get a image of Ptah and ask, like, how do I bring this, the good in? Like, what's my role in creating good from, you know, and from a place of love going forward? I think we could all do that. So we're all going to have to talk to Ptah going
You know,
forward.
the Native Americans have a saying, I don't know what tribe this comes from, but, you know, does it grow corn? You know, pass it through your heart to see if it grows corn. If it doesn't, don't do it. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's important. You know, does it grow corn? Is it life supporting? Is it enriching? You know, then do it. If it isn't, don't do it. We have choices to make.
Yeah.
You know, we might be able to do this. Is it a good idea?
Right.
So,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. So
I do too.
yeah, so it does really kind of fit with where we're at this year, at least so far with 2025. And so it's really fascinating to listen to what you're reading in the, you know, the stars and the planets and interpreting, and it's laying out in front of us, you know. So it's very, very interesting.
Fascinating.
And I love hearing the different deities that go with the different planets and signs, and it's really, really interesting. So
to go back to 2025, so Pluto is now firmly in the sign Aquarius, and it will stay in Aquarius. And the way I say this is that Osiris, who's the Egyptian ally of Pluto, is emanating through Ptah. Okay, so what that means is there's a lot of death and rebirth taking place through the energy of Ptah. A lot of allowing things die and allowing something new to be created. We have to be very careful, though. We have to have consciousness, and we have to make sure that what we create is loving. Right. That's really important. That's the choice we have. So now Pluto will stay in Aquarius through 2044. That's a long time, right? Basically 20 years, you know, that Pluto's going to be in Aquarius. So this year we get first Neptune. Neptune is Nephthys, who is the sister of Isis, twin sister of Isis. She's the lunar goddess. Isis is a solar goddess. So it's, you know, like duality, the light and the dark. You know, Isis holds the solar energy while her twin sister Nephthys holds the lunar energy. So Neptune Nephthys is moving into the sign Aries, from Pisces to Aries. And it moves into Aries on April 1st. And it's going to stay there until I had to make some notes here because I don't keep these things in my mind really well, until mid-October, when it's going to retrograde back into Pisces. So the beginning of the year, Neptune right now is still in Pisces, and the end of the year, Neptune will be in Pisces. It's been there for a long time. We're kind of used to this kind of, you know, confusing, you know, Neptune, Pisces is a very spiritually oriented, very cosmic sign, but it can also, in its shadow side, be a little confusing, you know, a little more than a little sometimes. You know, it's the energy is both vast, and in that vastness, sometimes you can feel like you're going to drown. Okay, so you know, there's that both and about it. Aries is the sign of the warrior in traditional astrology. This is Kepra in Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. It's the morning sun. There's the idea that every day is a new beginning. And at the same time, there's a protective kind of energy about Kepra. You know, it's the it's associated with the scarab, the dung beetle, who's pathogenetic, both masculine and feminine. It lays its own eggs and also fertilizes them. So, yeah, and raises them, pushes them around in a dung ball and until they're ready to hatch. So it is both nurturer and protector. So that's Capra energy, which is kind of the ideal expression of the warrior. It's not the expression of the warrior that we have on this planet, but it's the ideal expression of the warrior, of being both a nurturer and a protector. Which and not running amok, which is what we often get here on Earth. So we have, we have some wounding around warrior energy in this culture, which needs to be healed. I think Neptune's going to provide an opportunity for that. Neptune will stay in Aries for about 17, 18 years. However, when Neptune, this year, a big transit that we're going to be undergoing is what's called a conjunction and alignment. If we draw a straight line from the sun out to the sign Aries, we're going to find Saturn and Neptune aligned along it. That's what's called a conjunction. And for us, it means that the energies are blended in some way. So we're going to have a blending of the principle of constriction, that's Saturn, with this kind of wide open, effusive energy, which is Neptune. And they kind of, there's a little push-pull there, right? Saturn wants to consolidate things and Neptune wants to blow it wide open, so that energy is going to be present and it's going to be happening in the sign Aries. So it's kind of like, does that mean there's going to be more aggression, between countries? Possibly. That starts in June and it goes on to the September, October. So again, we're going to get a sense of what is this energy going to be? What is it? Neptune's not real happy in Aries. It's too confusing of an energy for it. So what is that going to be like? So, this summer is a time to definitely watch. And then we have Uranus, which is Wajet, moving from Taurus, where it has been for the last 7 years, into the air sign Gemini, which is a very fast-moving sign. It's associated with the Sphinx in Egyptian, the language of Egypt. The Sphinx is an earth altar. And what I mean by that is when you go to Egypt, and not just Egypt, you go to places around the world where there are stone structures, where there are, if you think of the Sphinx, if you think of the pyramids, what are they meant to do? And it's an interesting question to ask yourself. If you go to Mexico and look at the pyramids there, if you go to Stonehenge, if you go to these places around the world where the ancient people built these structures that have survived for thousands of years, what were they for? There's the anthropologists, the archaeologists have all kinds of theories, and they'll end up saying, well, no one really knows. Well, if you go there and you feel into the energies, you might begin to know, because what I believe they were designed to do is to connect with different constellations, with different star arrangements, pull that energy down, pull it through their own bodies, and then disseminate that energy out. So they are communicators. That's what Gemini does. It receives information. Inspiration. What is inspiration? It's allowing ourselves to open to energies coming down through us and then coming out. When we are inspired, we are inspirited. We are allowing spirit to come in, and then we move it out into the world. Okay, so Uranus is going to be doing that. Wajet is going to be doing that, emanating through the Sphinx. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to get a hint of that starts in the summer, in July, and goes on into November, when Uranus turns direction, November 9th. So there's a time there from late July, August, September, when we're going to have a whole new kind of energy coming through. And it's coming from multiple areas, from Saturn, Sobek, the old king, from Uranus, Wajet, the Cobra Kundalini goddess, from Neptune, Nephthys, the sister of Isis, who is the lunar goddess, who is the mother of Anubis. And earlier I was talking about Anubis. He was an abandoned child. Well, guess who abandoned him? Nephthys, whom we're supposed to trust. Good luck with that. She's the abandoned mother.
Great.
Well, anyone, and I know both of you are sensitives, right? So, when the call is to go forth, but you don't know where you're going and you have to go on trust, right? It's scary. But hopefully you do it. That's Nephthys when you're doing that, by the way. She's, like, follow me, come this way. Follow my voice. This is Siren's song. And you're like, well, but last time you kind of sent me on a tailspin. And she's like, do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
Yeah, that's part of the story here. Even if you go in it, that's part of the lesson. So the abandonment becomes part of the lesson. Ooh, okay. There's all kinds of complications. Again, in traditional astrology, we would only focus on the pain of the abandonment. In Shamanic Egyptian Astrology, we look at the abandonment as an opportunity. Painful, but nonetheless an opportunity. So lots of new things are going to be coming through this year. It's a turn point year. So is 2026. Because it's going to take 2 years for these planets, Uranus and Neptune, to get firmly in their new signs. And they're going to stay there for a number of years. So whatever this time is going to be about that we're entering into, it's going to be, we're going to be given a teaser this year and about a bit of time to let go of the old expression of me and to embrace this new one. And then we're going to be in a whole different dimensional experience. So it's important. It's an important time.
Wow. That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I expect it's going to involve technology. It's going to involve technology. And it's also going to involve earth changes that are already happening. So,
yeah. Wow.
Well, I can tell just from the chat room, just some of the comments, people are really thinking this is very interesting and cool. So I think, if you feel so inclined and you want to have a reading with Ruby, they can visit your website. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And your website is Shamanic. ShamanicStarology.com. And you can just fill out a little contact form there and get in touch with you to have a reading. There's also, I have my copy here of the Shamanic Astrology, Egyptian Astrology book that I bought from you a long time ago, and I had you sign it. And I remember I showed Steph. I go, look, she signed my book, and so I had Ruby sign it. So I still have my book, and I love it. It's very good. So if you guys are interested in a very fascinating read, get this book. It's very, very good. And
wow, mind-boggling for sure, Ruby. Thank you for coming on this evening. And I mean, all the comments are like, oh my gosh, so fascinating.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I know I get excited sometimes, so I hope I didn't overload people. One of the things when I do readings is I answer all questions. And I also record the readings because it's a lot.
Well, if you're not familiar with it, it can be, but I remember I was so fascinated with it, and it was really helpful because you have the both and in the readings, which I find very helpful because there's the wounds and the solutions, and there's going to be both, so it's helpful to address both and to hear about both. So so I still recommend you when I run my women's circles, if you want to, there's 2 people that I recommend, and Ruby is one of them. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
you do.
Yeah.
It's
I'd
wonderful.
also like to invite people to visit my Facebook page, also on Instagram. I post my when there is something going on astrologically at the full moon, at the new moon, when the sun moves from one sign to another, but also a lot of the big transits and the big aspects that I've been talking about, the movement of a planet like Uranus from Taurus to Gemini. I post, and they're short. I don't like them to be too long because I think people don't like to read really long things, and they're timely, so just visit if you're on Facebook or Instagram. It's Shamanic Starology on Instagram, and Ruby Falconer. And also I have a Shamanic Starology page on Facebook as well. And
Awesome.
you can, get a little flavor of, I get a lot of comments back on, oh, no wonder I've been having this difficulty because of some, particular energy that I'm talking about. It's like, yeah. And I don't shy away from saying this is a hard time, or well, it's a little bit easier right now. That's nice. Enjoy it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
interesting. Well, we're going to have you back on our show.
Yeah, for sure. So
Well, I would love that. And I'll tell you, it was fascinating to me to hear about the dog man. So
Yeah.
there are other, I'm just wondering, are there other parallels, so many.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Next time
I would love to.
we'll dig out another cryptid and see how we can find a parallel with Shamanic Egyptian astrology.
Absolutely. I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ruby. And thank you all for watching tonight and listening on the podcast. This will be on our podcast website as well, without video, just the voices. Thanks for everyone. Thank you to all the soldiers who are out there, the troops. If you're watching, please be safe. And thank you for your service.
Yes. And thank you to everybody listening, wherever you are, and to Cryptovania TV, who is hosting our show, and Jason Trost, our producer, who is pulling this all together. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night.